All right, Heather, we are live on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So thank you very much for joining us today. So let's wait a few seconds, just our viewers will receive notification and join us soon. Wow, great. Yes, our first viewers already join us. Good evening, everybody. Bishkek American Center is welcoming you. Hope you are all doing great and well these days. So, we are very happy to continue our regular program, virtual US state tours. And today we are going to visit Montana State. So, let me introduce our special guest speaker today, Heather Latino. So she will make a presentation about her home state, Montana. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting presentation. So please be active and ask your questions during the live. And after the presentation, Heather will answer them. So thank you very much, Heather. Oh, I already forgot to mention, Heather will arrive this summer. Yes, so it's great to hear about it. And thank you, Heather, once again. And let's start our session. So I will give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Aida. It is a pleasure to be here. I am from the state of Montana. That is where I was born. And I lived there during all of my childhood. I went to college there. I worked there for a long time. And so it is a place that is very near and dear and special to me. And so it's very fun for me to have the opportunity to talk about it. And I am very excited to be coming to Kyrgyzstan and Bishkek and to be able to see your beautiful country and some of the amazing things where you live as well. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen, and we can start with the presentation. So just one moment.
Okay. So, dear friends, you are welcome to type any comments, any questions under this video. So please do it.
Great. So I'll start with talking a little bit about where Montana is located in the United States. It's the state that you can see in red at the very north, west of the United States. We share a border with Canada. And then the states that border on the sides are Idaho. Directly south of Montana is Wyoming. And then to the east are North Dakota and South Dakota. Montana is one of the largest states in the United States. It's the fourth largest state, and so it's quite large. I looked just to try to have something to compare it to. It is about twice as big as the country of Kyrgyzstan, but at the same time, Montana doesn't have very many people. The entire population in the state is just over 1 million people, where I believe Kyrgyzstan has about 6.5 million people, so almost 6 times as many people as we have in the state. And so it's a very big state with very few people. And a lot of people really love it for that reason. It's a place where you can go, you can get out of the cities, out of the towns, and really be able to explore in places where you feel like no one else has been or no one else is at the very same time. The name Montana comes from a Spanish word meaning mountain. And you'll understand as I talk about some of the geography of Montana, like why that name makes sense for our state. Montana also has some nicknames that are also very fitting of the state. One of those is the Big Sky Country, and when you go to Montana, you get this sense that like the skies are very big. You can see very far into the distance. And And that's, something that people like think about and appreciate when they are there. Montana also has the nickname the Treasure State, and I'm showing on this screen Montana's flag, which is in the top right-hand corner, and in the middle there is the state seal. And on the state seal, it talks about a couple of the treasures that Montana has. In the very bottom, there's a logo that says Oro y Plata, which is also in Spanish. Oro means gold, and y is the word for and plata is silver. So gold and silver, because one of the reasons that people move to Montana, and a significant part of Montana's history, is centered around the gold rush. When people were moving from the eastern part of the United States to the western part of the United States in search of gold and other treasures. And you can see also here, there's like a pick. There's a tool that's called a pick and a shovel. Those are both tools that are used as part of the mining industry. And so it's in reference to the fact that it is a state that has treasures that have been relied upon as natural resources. And then the last best place, I think, is a more recent nickname for Montana. Talking about how it's really this, like, there are places in Montana where there is still amazing beauty, and places that have not been touched by people, and are still like wonderful, like beautiful places that are unspoiled. And I will show you some of those places as we move through the slides. The animal that you see on the bottom left hand of the screen is a grizzly bear. That is the state animal for Montana. They are a very large bear. I lived in Montana for like 30 plus years, and I've never seen a grizzly bear in the wild myself, so they're also somewhat unusual to encounter. But the grizzly bear is our state animal. In the middle, you'll see the state bird, which is a western meadowlark. I think that we share that state bird with some other states as well, and maybe because they are, very beautiful and also sound incredible. And then on the far right-hand side of the screen is a cutthroat trout, which is the state fish. And fishing is an important part of the culture. A lot of people like to fish for recreational reasons. Move to the next slide, which shows, again, this is another map of the state of Montana, but this shows like a little bit of the topography and it's important because the state is very different in terms of its topography. On the western side of the state, the Rocky Mountain range goes through the western part of the state. And so you can see where it's this greenish brown color. This is all a very like rocky, mountainous region where it's at a very high altitude. And then as you come over to the eastern part of the state, the state flattens out, and it's the topography is more of plains land, so it's flat and grasslands and very dry. A couple other things I wanted to point out. So the area where I grew up was in the mountains. So in this like southwestern or western part of the state. In the northwestern part of the state, there's this like, it looks very tiny here, but it doesn't feel tiny when you go visit it. But there's like a lake up in the northwestern corner of the state called Flathead Lake. And it's the largest freshwater lake in the lower 48 states in the United States, west of the Mississippi. And so we think of it as like a large lake in our state, but it is very small compared to Lake Issyk, which is at least 12 times as big as Flathead Lake, which is in our state. Then let me see if there's anything else. There's a couple other things that I'll just point out because I'm going to show them to you later in the presentation. There is a national park up here in this like northwestern part of the state called Glacier, and I'll show you some pictures and we'll talk about that. And then there's another national park down here in the southwest part of the state called Yellowstone National Park, and it crosses over into Wyoming. And if you listen to any of the other state presentations, you've probably heard about it before. As I mentioned, I grew up on the western side of the state, and so I wanted to share a little bit about the western part of the state with you. The picture on the left is a picture of mountains in the Rocky Mountains, and then a very amazing animal, if you ever get the chance to see it. Mountain goats can sometimes be seen in the mountains, and so this is a picture of, you know, like one of the areas in western Montana that I think is really beautiful. On the right-hand side of the page, I wanted to share with you, at least where I grew up, horses are a very important part of my culture and my upbringing. I grew up on a ranch, where horses were used traditionally to help herd and take care of the animals. And it's not used as common in Montana anymore. Horses are not, but they are still used for some ranches. And what you see here is an example of a person competing at a rodeo. And the rodeo and state fair where I lived were very big events that happened once a year. And it was a social event where we would all come together and get to see our neighbors and our friends. But it was also an opportunity to demonstrate and show some of the skills that people have in their professions. And so if you are someone who works on a ranch and with cattle, the rodeo has events where you can show off or demonstrate your equestrian skills. And so what you see here is a woman who is being timed, and her goal is to rope or put a rope around this calf as quickly as she can, and then to stop the calf, and whoever does that the fastest wins. And there are other events as well where people compete using their horsemanship skills. I'm going to just share briefly a little bit about my family. So as I mentioned, I grew up on a ranch where we raised cattle. This picture on the right shows a picture of a group fishing on a river. And my brother he works in the tourism industry, and he takes people fishing and teaches them how to do it when they're traveling and doing it for fun. My mother was a teacher, and she taught in a very tiny school, a 2-room schoolhouse, which is very small by American standards. And her school had students ranging from age 5 all the way up to age 14. But like a common size for that school might be, somewhere between 15 and 20 students. And that's the type of school that I also went to when I was growing up. My school had 2 or 3 classrooms, and sometimes my class size was as small as 4 people in one classroom with one teacher. And so that was a really amazing experience to be able to work that closely with teachers. And Aida, I hope that you will interrupt me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will just keep going through. But let me pause here and see if there's anything that you wanted to jump in and ask or say.
Heather, thank you very much. We received a couple of questions. So the first one, what states border with Montana?
I'm sorry, Aida, can you say that one more time?
What states border with Montana?
The states that border with Montana are Idaho. Wyoming is to the south of Montana. And then to the east of Montana is North Dakota and South Dakota.
Thank you. And the next question, are there pastures in Montana state?
Yes, there are you say pastures, like open lands where animals will eat?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes, there are pastures in Montana. In fact, on the ranch where I grew up, we used a couple different kinds of pastures. There were some that were very close to our home, where we would keep the animals when we wanted them close to us. So, for example, when they might be having babies. And in the summertime, we would move the animals to more open pastures where they could roam around and had a lot more freedom to go where they wanted to. And so that we would call that like an open range, where the animals would go in the summer and be able to like eat and have a lot more freedom. That's a great question. I'm so glad that somebody asked that.
Great. Thank you very much, Heather. I think we can continue and then, yes, we will ask the
Great.
questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. So here are a few more pictures of Montana. In the upper left-hand corner, this is a picture of what's called a ghost town. So it was a city that used to be very vibrant, lots of people, and very important to the state. The city is called Bannock. It was the first state capital. But now nobody lives there, which is why it's called a ghost town. It was settled like as part of the gold rush that I talked about. People moved there to mine and look for gold. And then when those opportunities went away, people moved away from Bannock. But it's very interesting to be able to go there and see these old buildings that used to be used by people. There's like churches that are still there. There's still a school, the old stores, and some of the other buildings. As you move over to the right-hand side of the screen, this is a picture of a city in southwestern Montana that was very near to where I grew up. The city is called Butte. And what you can see in this picture is another example of areas that have been mined in Montana. And so you see there's a great big open mining pit at the right next to the city. And then hopefully you guys can see, but I'm not sure like how well this comes through, but there is like a pit here that has water in it as well. And these are both left over from earlier times when Butte was a very important place for copper mining, and they used open pits to mine those areas. And the remains of those mining activities still remain. It's one of the areas that the state and the government is trying to clean up because there are some things left over from that mining activity that are not healthy for the people who live in the area. And so the government is trying to help improve the environmental conditions in places where there has been a lot of mining activity. In the bottom corner of the screen, I just wanted to show, this is a picture of the University of Montana, which is where I went to school, and the grizzly bear is the mascot for the state of Montana, or for the University of Montana in Missoula. And so there's a big sculpture of a grizzly bear on the campus. The University of Montana has had in the past a special relationship with Kyrgyzstan and has sent professors, particularly professors from its law school, to come and join professors in Kyrgyzstan to talk about the teaching of law and different ways to teach. And then professors from Kyrgyzstan have come and visited the University of Montana to share their experiences as well. And so we have had an educational partnership there. When I mentioned earlier that I wanted to show you a picture of Glacier National Park, which is in the northern part of Montana and obviously in the mountainous part. And here is one of the gorgeous pictures of Glacier National Park, which is an area that's protected by the United States government. And it is a spectacularly beautiful place to visit. It has hundreds and hundreds of miles of hiking trails, and people love to go there to backpack, to cycle through the park, and a lot of people will camp there. And it's known for its mountains, also known for its glaciers, which are ice formations. And because they are unusual to be able to find in the United States anymore, it attracts a lot of people to the park. Approximately 3 million people visit each year. And the reason that a lot of people are coming are to visit the glaciers. One thing that I think is interesting is that the glaciers in Glacier National Park and in other places throughout the world have been shrinking in size over time. And there are pictures that have been taken like from year after year after year that demonstrate some of the changes that we're seeing in Glacier National Park. And so the picture that you see on the left is a picture from 1938 of the Grinnell and Salamander glaciers at Glacier National Park. And on the right is a picture of that same glacier in 2019. And what you can see is in 1938, there's an ice field here. This is all ice. It's ice up here as well. But by 2019, there's just this ice that remains up on the shelf, and then like a little bit down here in the corner. But you no longer see this entire area down in the bottom right-hand corner covered by a glacier. And so that's part of what we're observing as the climate is changing over time. The other national park that I mentioned that's in the southern part of the state is Yellowstone National Park. It's also an area that's protected by the United States government. People also love to visit Yellowstone, but for different reasons. Yellowstone is known for its bison, which you can see in the picture on the left. Bison are a very large mammal, and they were an important animal in the lives of Native Americans who lived in the United States before white people came. And so Yellowstone is a wonderful place to be able to go see bison living in their natural environment. Yellowstone also has like incredible lakes and rivers and mountains, but it is most famous for its hydrothermal features or systems. Hydro meaning water and thermal meaning heat. And there's a large volcano underneath the national park, and that volcano creates heat that results in thermal features, things like hot springs, so like water that you can go be in and it is hot because of the ground is heating it up. Mud pots where like the earth is kind of bubbling, these like hot mud bubbles, and then geysers. And I'm hoping that this will work, but I'd like to show you a quick video of a geyser eruption in Yellowstone so that you can see. So some geysers erupt on a regular basis, some do it not on a regular basis, and it can be a very amazing experience to be able to see one of them erupt. And you can see that the water is it's going very high into the air. And so it's a very amazing thing to be able to go and experience in nature. I want to shift to the eastern side of the state now and talk about some of the geography or topography that you would see on the eastern side of the state, which looks very different. And the industries that are seen on the eastern side of the state are also very different. You can see that there are still rivers with some, I wouldn't call this a mountain, but hills like coming out of the ground. But most of the land starts to look very flat and is used primarily to produce grains that are grown to feed animals, create wheat, Montana has very good wheat that's grown. And then like over time, there's become like increasing just like dependence on oil production in the eastern side of the state. So there are some like oil fields as well. And also places where people are like looking for gas resources to use those resources. The other thing that we see in the eastern side of the state is an area that's called Badlands. This is a picture here of a state park. So it's an area that's preserved by the state of Montana rather than the U.S. government. This state park is called Makoshika, and Makoshika is a Lakota word for bad land or bad earth. Lakota is one of the Native American tribes in the state of Montana. And badlands meaning like not an area that's very conducive to farming, and raising wheat or grains, corn or other things, and also not very conducive to being able to like raise animals. This part of the state is known for having lots of dinosaur fossils. And the state in particular has a lot of dinosaur fossils. So it's an interesting place if you want to go and see things that have been preserved in the rocks. You can see, some of those like remnants of animals from like many, many, many years ago. I mentioned the Lakota word for that state park that we just talked about, Makoshika, and I wanted to transition to talk about some of the people who lived and continue to live in the state of Montana before white people came. There are 7 Indian reservations in the state of Montana because there is a large Native American population. When white people came to the state of Montana, there were conflicts between the people who were coming and the people who had lived in the area for many, many generations. And as those disputes happened, those disputes over land ownership and control of the lands, the tribes entered into treaties with the U.S. government. And part of those treaties were to set aside land where Native Americans would have that land set aside for their purposes, and they would also be a place for them to live. And this shows like different reservations that are spread throughout the state of Montana. There are 7 different reservations in Montana. And at those 7 reservations, there are 12 different distinct Native American ethno-linguistic groups who live in these different places. And that state park that I was just showing you is down in this area where the Crow Reservation and the Northern Cheyenne Reservation is located. In Montana now, at one time, Native Americans were required to live on reservations. That is not a requirement. It is land that is set aside for them. And currently, about 63% of the Native Americans in the state of Montana do not live on reservations. They live in other places throughout the state. And Montana, I think, is somewhat unique in that the Montana Constitution recognizes that the Native American cultures are very unique and distinct, and that it's important for us to preserve those educations, to preserve their culture and their cultural identity. And so the state constitution requires that schools, like all schools in Montana, teach about the unique cultures of the Native Americans and the American Indians, and help preserve that culture going forward. And as far as I know, it's one of the only states that does that. Here is a photograph of 3 women who are part of the Crow tribe, which is that area that I showed you a moment ago in the southern part of the state. These are pictures from an event that that is held on the Crow Reservation every August. The Crow Fair happens, and these women are dressed up in very traditional dress for that festival or celebration of their culture. And it attracts more than 50,000 people who come and visit it each August. The other thing that I wanted to show you is an example of the housing that was used traditionally amongst Native Americans in Montana. Many of the Native American tribes in Montana were nomadic tribes, meaning that they didn't live in any one place for long periods of time. They would move depending upon where there was food, where the bison were located, and the teepee, which is the type of housing that they used, is housing that could be put up easily by people, but could also be taken down and moved as they were moving around the land in search of food, and it's just part of their tradition. So this is a traditional house for Native Americans who live in the United States, particularly nomadic tribes in the West. This is a picture of a city called Great Falls. It's on the eastern side of the state as well. And I just wanted to point out Great Falls is the sister city to Narin. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but that sister city relationship was developed many years ago as a way to be able to have people come visit Montana and to have people from Montana go visit Kyrgyzstan. And this is a picture on the left of just the downtown part of Great Falls. And then you can see outside of the city of Great Falls in this upper right-hand corner is a picture of kind of what the land looks like. It's very dry. And then a picture of a very typical traffic scene in Great Falls where there are not a lot of people, but this is what a busy street would look like in that city. In this slide, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what people do in Montana for fun, for recreation. People who live there very much love to be outdoors, and outdoors activities are an important part of many people's lives in Montana and part of the culture. And so you can see in the top picture, it's a group of people who are skiing in the wintertime. This is cross-country skiing or Nordic skiing, but we also very much enjoy downhill skiing, as I believe many people in Kyrgyzstan do as well. The bottom left-hand side of the screen is someone hiking through the mountains. People love to cycle and mountain bike, and here's a picture in the middle that's in Missoula, which is where I went to college, of someone mountain biking on the mountains that border the city. And then water sports are also a very fun, valued recreational opportunity. This picture in the bottom right-hand corner is a group of people who are kayaking on the river, and people do other activities with big rafts. Will sometimes go down the river. As I mentioned before, fishing is an important and fun activity as well. And just want to close out the tour and this part of the presentation with a picture of what Montana can look like in the winter time, which I think is one of the most beautiful times to be able to see it. And so this is a picture obviously up in the mountains, when it's in the middle of winter and there's lots of snow on the ground. And then I will pause there. That's the last photo that I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and check in with Aida to see if there are questions that I can answer, or if there are other things that I didn't talk about that anyone would like to spend some time talking about.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much, Heather, for the great and fascinating presentation. It was interesting to learn more about Montana State, and I think these interesting facts also were very useful for our audience to learn and to get know. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Yes, we received a lot of questions. Yes.
Great.
So let me start to ask these questions. Hello, Heather. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Please tell us about triple divide fact.
Um, I'm not sure like what the triple divide is in reference to. It's what it might be, and the questioner should like let me know if I'm not answering the right one. But there is there's something called the continental divide that goes down the Rocky Mountains, and it kind of divides up like the water shed. And so that continental divide, if you are at the top of it, then like some of the water flows towards the Pacific Ocean, and on the other side of the divide, all of the water is flowing towards the Atlantic Ocean. And so it's an important feature because the Rocky Mountains kind of form that continental divide that goes from the very northernmost part of North America all the way to the very southern part of South America. And so that might be what the questioner is asking, but if not, please let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much, Heather. The next question, is it true that Montana is famous for Tyrannosaurus skeleton?
Yes, it is. And there are lots of other like fossils and artifacts that Montana is known for. I have never had the opportunity to go to an archaeological site and do the like digging myself. My mom, who was a teacher, did that as part of like her education to be able to go and sift through and look for fossils and have that experience. But yes, it is famous for that.
Great, so interesting. Thank you, Heather. What does mean the word ditch? I think in Montana.
I love these questions. Ditch is so in order to move water from one place to another, like we would dig ditches that would allow the water to move. And so a great example of this is where my parents' ranch, there's not water like on their property. And so we have to get water from the river that's about it's probably a half mile away from the ranch. We need to move it over to our property so that it's there for the animals. But also because Montana, where I live, is very dry, there's not a lot of rain. And so for us to be able to grow things, we have to move the water and irrigate, which means to like put water on the land. And so a ditch is just like an indentation in the ground that is dug to be able to allow that water to flow.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. The next question is, have you seen the Row River?
Which river is it?
The
Row River.
The Row River.
No, I have not seen the Row River. There's a river called the Missouri River, and I showed a picture of that, which is a very big, expansive river. But I have not been to the Row River.
Thank you, Heather. The next, thank you, ladies. The presentation was great. Is everything operates as normal in Montana now?
That's a great question. So right now I live in Washington, D.C. area. I'm not in the state of Montana. So I don't have firsthand experience being and living there. But from talking with friends and family, I don't think it's exactly normal yet. Like other places in the country, I think there are still like some schools that are not operating full time. Some students who are attending classes like from remotely, virtually, like we are having this presentation today. And I think there are still some businesses that are, trying not to have people coming in person. But one of the things that did happen during the pandemic is there was a lot of travel to Montana, because it was a place where people could go and they could be outside and explore and not be interacting with other people. And so there was actually like tourism continued to happen even during the pandemic because it has a lot of like open natural spaces. It's a great question.
Thank you, Heather. So, is it allowed to travel from one state to other state?
It is. It is. So there's nothing that you have to be able to move, like to travel from Montana to Idaho. One difference is it's a little bit different if we want to go from Montana to Canada, which is a different country immediately to the north. And so if we want to drive into Canada, we have to stop, and there is like border control and customs, to like check in with, like as we are leaving and then also as we are coming back into the country. But that doesn't happen when you move between states. Great question.
Thank you, Heather. And the next question is Montana sapphire famous across the world? Is what question?
Oh, also like a great question. There, as part of like the treasures of Montana, there is sapphire mining and was sapphire mining. And sapphires are a very beautiful gem. And one of the things that I loved to do as a child is my parents would take us to a place that used to be used for sapphire mining, and we would get to dig and look for sapphires as like an activity, and which was very fun. And so yes, there are, Montana does have beautiful sapphires.
I mean, is it correct to pronounce like sapphire? Yes?
It is. That's perfect.
Yes. Thank you for sharing this, Heather. So interesting. Yes. The Montana is very unique state. I think a lot of unique animals, and there are fossils, dinosaurs fossils. It's so fascinating. So thank you very much, Heather. I think it was the last question from audience, and I do believe that people will watch it later and definitely will ask questions later, I think. So yes, and it's time to close up our session. Heather, thank you very much. We definitely learned so many things today about Montana State. And
thank you so much for having me. It was very much a pleasure for me to be able to join you. And it was fun to be able to hear all of the different questions that people had about Montana and the information that people already knew about the state as well.
Great. And thank you, dear viewers, for your questions and comments. It was a pleasure to see how active you are. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, everybody. So see you in our next sessions. And bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day, Heather, and have a great evenings. And bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.